joining us tonight. What I wanted to say a few things first off, but our topic for tonight will be focused on annual stewardship, titled Flourish in Faith, Best Practices in Your Annual Giving Campaign, with the wonderful Laurel Johnston, who's with us tonight. Just a real quick commercial for the Episcopal Church Foundation, who hosts Laurel and Tens this evening. The Episcopal Church Foundation, for those of you who don't know, is an independent and lay-led organization. We are the national foundation for the entire Episcopal Church, and we only serve the Episcopal Church, its entities, its parishes and dioceses. We do that in a number of different ways, through the area that I oversee in financial resources, through our work in endowment management, planned giving, capital campaigns, which we're able to do all across the country, as well as some of our other work in leadership development. And it is so wonderful to have all of you here tonight and experiencing, once again, our leap into the future with technology to see us on video. I've done many of these. However, it was always in my t-shirt, not in a little shirt and tie, because it's so warm in my office. So that's why I'm going to turn off my video camera in a moment. But just a few quick notes. If you do have a question, you are always welcome to type in to the chat session, and I will be monitoring our chat session throughout, and there will be times for questions throughout the presentation. In addition, you can also raise your hand, and that is a function at the top of your screen, where the little fellow with the hand up, if you do the drop down next to that, you will see you have options for raising your hand if you have a question, and I will also be monitoring that. And as I say, there will be an opportunity for questions at a time. So there is someone who has their hand raised right now. If you'd like, you can type me a chat message, and we can try and help you right now. But we're going to get started. Just a few quick notes. Please do keep your phone or your PC speaker muted. This is the best way for us to conduct our webinar. It's also what's known as netiquette, which is so that we can hear our wonderful speaker and that we'll be able to hear each other when the time comes. So I'd like to start with a brief prayer before I introduce Laurel Johnston. So if I may, the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Thank you, Laurel, for the group. O merciful Creator, your hand is open wide to satisfy the needs of every living creature. Make us always thankful for your loving providence, and grant that we, remembering the account that we must one day give, may be faithful stewards of your good gifts, through Jesus Christ our Lord, who with you and the Holy Spirit lives and reigns, one God, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you all so much for attending. Just a quick note, we are recording this event, and we will be sending out the recording to everyone so that you can replay any section which you feel you missed. We will also be stopping for questions. You can send your question through the chat message on the screen or raise your hand, and we will try and work with you. Laurel Johnston, who I like to call my friend, and she is my friend,
Right.
Has served as a program officer for stewardship for the Episcopal Church for the past 4 years. During that time, she has developed several stewardship formation resources, including Feasting on Gratitude, Stewardship Narrative Series, the narrative series on Blessed to be a Blessing, and she's written Finding Hope in Hard Times, 7 Spiritual Practices of a Faithful Steward. Prior to serving as curate at St. John the Baptist in the Diocese of El Camino Real, Laurel was Director of Development for CARE, the International Relief and Development Organization in San Francisco. She served as a major gift officer there and public relations officer as well for the American Red Cross Los Angeles chapter. Laurel earned her bachelor degree in international relations and Spanish from UC Davis and earned her Master of Divinity degree from Church Divinity School of the Pacific, or otherwise known as CDSP. I'm a GTS grad myself. This month, Laura will transition into serving as the Executive Director for the Episcopal Network for Stewardship, also known as TENS, which is co-sponsoring our event tonight. And TENS is an organization committed to nurturing generosity and faithful discipleship. And I'm glad to turn everything over to Laurel. Carol Holt, if you could please go to the top of your screen and turn off your webcam. And Laurel, you have the floor. I'm going to turn off my webcam.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jim, a good friend of mine. And thank you to ECF for hosting this. This is a great example of stewardship of time and resources and talent. And I think we all, on behalf of everybody, let me express a gratitude to ECF for furthering the ministry of congregational vitality and stewardship throughout the wider church. And thank all of you for coming tonight. It's great to see that your names and where you're from all over the country. And the fact that you are all thinking about the annual giving campaign in February, and now almost March, is a great sign. It points to me that you recognize the importance and the need for year-round planning for the annual giving campaign, a way that we are raising funds for God's vision in your congregation. And that's what we are going to focus on tonight, of some best practices, planting the seeds for an effective annual giving campaign. So we're going to go into some nuts and bolts of that. But first, what I want to spend a little bit of time is kind of dwelling for a very short time in the theology of stewardship and some biblical principles of stewardship. You'll see on the screen here some of the topics that we'll cover. Theological touchstones of stewardship, the purpose of an annual giving campaign, again, some best practices. I'll point to generational giving and the different options and mediums that are out there for giving. I will show you a sneak peek of our Flourish in Faith Stewardship Narrative Series and explain a little bit more about that. And then we'll look at how we practice gratitude and how we are shaping our ministry in terms of thanking our members and thanking our donors. So we will be covering quite a bit of ground. I am going to move quickly, but we will pause about a third of the way through this presentation for questions. And as Jim mentioned, you can use the icon on your screen or type in a chat. I will also be available via email post this webinar if you have any other questions. So without any further ado, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So we begin our conversation of stewardship with the understanding of what does it mean to be a steward. Stewardship is not a program or a campaign. It really begins with the understanding of who we are and to whom we belong. So the biblical understanding of stewardship is a steward is a manager, a caretaker of trust, a caretaker of all that has been entrusted to us. The word stewardship comes from the Greek word oikonomia. Oikos means house. Oikonomia is the management or the stewardship of the household. That is where we get the derivative of the word economy, from oikonomia. So as God's stewards, we are entrusted with our life, with our resources, our talents, our skills, to serve in God's household. And we hear that call in our baptismal covenant, our baptismal identity. We are baptized into God's household and called to serve as God's stewards. So when does God first call us to be stewards? Well, we look at the very beginning. We go back to the beginning of our creation story, right? And we can remember how the opening words of Genesis, how, from a dark, watery void, God calls in a created, intelligent order. And we recall how each day of the creation story ends, right? It is good, it is good, it is good. So when we talk about God's abundance, the generosity of God, the goodness of God, from a faith perspective, we confess, we understand that generosity and abundance and fruitfulness is entwined into the very fabric of all of creation, of the created order. And that primarily it is blessed. It is good. So on the sixth day, we know that God creates humankind in God's image. God calls us to be fruitful and to multiply. And we know that that is not just about being procreative. It is about all the ways that we are life-giving. We image God by giving life. So we recognize that on the sixth day, as humans, we are part and parcel of the created order, but God gives us a very privileged role to play as God's stewards. And that comes in this understanding of sharing in dominion, of sharing in the care of creation. So to be created in God's image, inherently we are designed for goodness and generosity, and we are given this vocational call to serve as God's stewards, to care for all of the created order of God's household. And this idea about sharing dominion. Dominion can have sometimes carry a lot of negative connotations with it. We can look at our world today and recognize that we fall very short, right, from ruling as how God would rule. And when we think about God's ways, how God rules, we recognize that the two hallmarks of how God rules is through peace and through justice. And this understanding of peace and justice can be understood in this vision of God, of the Hebrew understanding of Shalom, which means peace. It's not just the absence of violence or war, but the biblical understanding of peace or Shalom is really about health, wholeness, harmony, right relationship, fulfillment. Shalom is what God experienced on the seventh day of creation, on the day of Sabbath. So when we speak about God's vision, we understand that Shalom is the condition in which all living things are allowed to reach their potential of wholeness. Okay? So as God's stewards, we are aligned with this vision of Shalom, of peace and justice. And we hear that also in our baptismal covenant. Will you work for peace and justice and respect the dignity of every human being? Okay, so as God's stewards, we recognize that these gifts are entrusted to us. We are called to a vocational role of serving as God's stewards, and we're called to a purpose, to bring about God's vision of Shalom. And we can look to Jesus, the steward par excellence, as the one who continually points to God's vision, continually points to God's vision of Shalom in the kingdom of God. We know that Jesus was not generally never pointed to himself, right? He was always pointing towards the vision of the Father. So when we think about stewardship, we come back to what does it mean to be part of creation? What does it mean to be in relationship with God, Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer? We understand that we live in a covenantal relationship with God, that God creates creation. Okay? And again, this is not a scientific statement. It is a statement, a confession of our faith. And to recognize that God as creator of the universe, which we are part of, we recognize there is distance, that the world has some distance from God and life of its own, but it belongs to God, and we do not have life without God. So one of the primary principles of stewardship, of what it means to be a steward, is that we recognize that the entirety of life is gift. It is pure gift. When we dwell in the spirituality of a steward, we embrace the spirituality of the psalmist, that the earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, and those who live in it. So the biblical truth about stewardship is that as stewards, we don't own really anything. All is gift, all is given, all is entrusted to us to care for as best as we can, as faithfully as we can. So the questions that we grapple with and explore in our faith communities is, with open hands, how do we respond? We are created in God's image. We are created in total freedom. So the choice is always before us. How do we respond? Okay. So the purpose of the stewardship ministry team, and I could see that many of you are serving on the Vestry as liaisons, or you're the chair of a new chair of your congregation. You know, your ministry is to help people grow in relationship with Christ through the gifts that God has entrusted to them. Okay? You could see, looking at this definition, that you could create a whole year-round stewardship ministry based on this definition. This goes above and beyond just the annual giving campaign, but we know that the annual giving campaign is one of the primary ministries of the stewardship ministry team, and that's why we're going to focus that on tonight. But I hope that what one of your takeaways from this evening will be that you no longer call it just a stewardship campaign, because it's like saying a discipleship campaign. All right, stewardship is not a campaign, it's a process. So the annual giving campaign is a way that we practice our stewardship. Okay, and so when we are looking at ways that we explore conversations and share stories and share letters, we talk about our annual giving campaign, understanding that we look at our giving as response in terms of spiritual discipline. So when we talk about the tithe is a spiritual discipline. It is a habit. Okay? We look at our annual giving campaign as a way that we invite members of our faith community to offer worship and praise and gratitude to God and to others in the faith community for the life given, for the value of that faith community. And the annual giving campaign is a way to fund God's vision through your congregation. I hope you're hearing what I'm not saying here as well. The annual giving campaign is not just to fund the budget. Okay, it's a formation piece. It is a way of worship, and it is a way that your congregation can talk about the vision of God in your community. Okay, people do not give to a budget. People give to vision. So part of your ministry is holding up the vision and mission of your congregation to each other and to the outside community. So 4 questions to consider in shaping a culture of stewardship in your congregation. One is, what is the expectation of what does it mean to be a member? Or I should say, what is the expectation of what does it mean to be a disciple in your congregation? Often, so many of us are so happy that people are there and showing up, we don't want to scare them away. And we kind of often will leave them guessing of when they actually become a member. So some of the fastest growing congregations in the Episcopal Church are congregations that are intentional about new member orientation, new member integration, and part of that is the spelling out of what it means to be a member. The screenshot you see here is from St. Timothy's. This is the congregation that raised me up in the ordination process. This 6 marks of a disciple was on every worship bulletin, newsletter, website. I know it's hard to read here, but the 3rd mark is one who honors the tithe as a biblical standard of faithful giving to the church. Now, a lot of people, there was a handful of people who were tithing. There was a lot that were not, but the expectation and the intentionality of formation around working towards the tithe was part of the culture of the community. And again, this congregation was in Silicon Valley, where 10% of the population goes to church. The second question to consider is, how are you teaching the biblical principles of stewardship throughout the year for children, youth, and adults? The third is your clergy and your lay leadership, your vestry leadership, making their commitment public? Are they setting the pace? Are they being intentional about formation of stewardship year-round? And when I talk about making it public, it's in a variety of ways, through preaching, through the stewardship, the letters that go out for the annual giving campaign, through all the ways that you communicate, e-blasts and newsletters. Many of the clergy and lay leaders choose to talk about simply their story of where they're at, knowing what percentage they give, and saying what their intention is for that year. You don't have to be at a tithe to share your story. You share your authentic story where you're at. And the fourth is, how are you helping people integrate their faith and their finances? If our church, if our faith community is only talking about money right before the annual giving campaign, that is self-serving. We need to recognize that money is rarely neutral. It is both blessing and curse, but it's a blessing. It's sacramental in its nature, but we know that it is a primary candidate for idolatry. It is often, the source of problems in marriage and relationships. So by ignoring the issues around money and how we look at our decisions about giving and sharing and saving with a faith lens is just part of ongoing formation. So when we look at our annual giving campaign, we want, and it's fantastic that you're all thinking about this early, because you will want to create a plan that is unique to your congregation and you want it to be a generous, a joyous and life-giving experience. It should be a time of both challenge and celebration. Okay, so I'm going to stop here and take any questions that you have so far.
Thanks, Laurel. Just so that everyone knows, if you missed that, you may certainly type in your question onto chat at any time, and I, at these times, will read a couple questions to Laurel. If you have a particular question right now, you may also raise your hand, which is done by the raising of the hand icon right at the top of your screen with a little fellow with his hand up in the air. You can click on the drop-down and raise your hand as well. And we do have a couple folks typing in questions right now, Laurel.
Okay, right.
It hasn't shown yet. And still typing, but it's not showing up yet. I had, so be sure if you do have a question anytime, you can certainly input that question and it will come up. Okay, none of the questions have come up yet for some reason, Laurel. So is there any other reiteration you would like to make at this time while we wait for some of these questions to pop up?
No, I think we're going to move on into the practices of an annual giving campaign, and we'll leave time at the end as well for people to ask questions. If that's okay?
Yep, go right ahead, please, Laurel.
All right. Let me point out also that you will be sent this PowerPoint as well as a Word document. It's called the Annual Giving Timeline. You can download it from the site here, or again, it will be emailed to you. And the Annual Giving Timeline is a much more detailed timeline than what I'm going to talk about in this presentation. And it begins in January, ends in December. So I commend that to you because that will capture some of the highlights that I'm going to talk about here, but also walk you through, again, what you could bring to your stewardship ministry planning team or to your vestry and go from there. I do want to preface all of this by saying I'm going to point to some best practices. Keep in mind that you can choose one or two to do this year. You don't have to do them all. So don't get overwhelmed in thinking that you have to get everything done this year. But think about maybe one or two of these practices you'd like to try. So we begin with the numbers, knowing what we're working with. You'll want to analyze the trends. Look at your giving from the last 5 years. You can go to this link here, which shows the demographics of your community. It shows average salaries, a cost of housing, public school systems. This will kind of give you just some good base groundwork of knowledge of your community. You'll want to know who has moved or died or left the parish and the impact on pledging. One of the realities is that when one of our long-standing members leaves, it often takes anywhere from 7 to 10 pledges to make up for that one pledge. Okay, so again, pointing back to the new member integration, you'll want to tend to new members very conscientiously, because with the dynamics of changing demographics, people moving, you'll want to keep your eye on that. So looking at your numbers over the last 5 years, and being able to have the conversation of who knows the information about giving in your congregation. This is something that needs to be explored in your faith community. There's not a right or wrong answer. I have an opinion about it. But basically, if you are a stewardship chair, you should know what people are giving. Your rector or vicar should know what people are giving. And perhaps the senior warden. You need the information to be effective. The information is held in confidence. You'll want people to be on this team who are not judgmental. If we think about giving as a sign of spiritual health or spiritual maturity, you want to know if somebody goes from a $400 gift to a $4,000 gift. Something is happening. So so the idea of not knowing really kind of reflects some of our tendencies to not talk openly and authentically about money, right? Often people say there's been a conspiracy of silence around money, and Jesus talked a lot about money, and we need to as well. So analyzing the trends, that's something that you'll want to do in the first quarter of the year. Creating a Vestry stewardship statement. This can be done at your Vestry retreat. If you've already done your retreat for this year, that's fine. Your stewardship ministry team could take this on as well, or your stewardship ministry team could lead the Vestry in this process. There is a link here at the bottom of your screen, and that is an article written by our colleague Angie Emerson. She's the Director of Stewardship in Vermont, and she wrote a very succinct piece on how to create a Vestry stewardship statement. But this is something that you want to do early in the year. It invites people to dwell in a theology of stewardship, what they actually believe, what they invite others in your faith community to participate in, and what they commit to themselves. This is something, again, that could be published in all the your communication mediums, newsletter, emails, website. Often, vestries come up with such beautiful stewardship statements that they could be used as collects and opening prayers during your annual giving campaign. A Vestry stewardship statement is not something that you want to wait till August or September. It is something that you want to start in the first quarter or the second quarter of the year. Creating a narrative budget, often called mission-driven budgets. ECF has some great resources on how to do this on their website. Also, you can Google narrative budgets and you'll see a lot of great examples. But essentially, nonprofits have been doing this for years. A narrative budget essentially tells the story of your congregation, and it paints a picture of how funds are used in your congregation. So instead of a line item budget that you give out possibly at your annual meeting, and often in most congregations you'll see that majority, a significant amount of the budget is towards priests and staff salaries and benefits, and that doesn't really accurately reflect the mission and ministry of the wider congregation. So you would look at the overall budget and divide it up into ministry areas. outreach, formation, youth, music, communications, and allocate the budget according to the mission ministry areas. This is something, again, that can be put with your newcomers packets, something that is available in the narthex, something that is online. You want to be able to share the story of your congregation. This is much more effective, again, in pointing to your vision and your mission. Okay? And a lot more interesting than a line item budget. So your annual giving campaigns, you will need to choose what kind of campaign you want to engage in. There's several out there, including the festive meal. That's often a dinner, a dinner celebration. You invite a speaker in. It's an official kickoff of the campaign. Campaigns should run anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, not longer than that. You'll probably have to do follow-up after 6 weeks, but you don't want them to drag on and on. So the festive meal, a personal letter writing, the advantages to this is that it gets a lot of people involved. You recruit essentially for one person to write 3 or 4 letters to somebody in the congregation, and these are handwritten letters. They talk about why their church community is beloved to them, is of value to them, and shares that invites them to give. It definitely has a lot of merit. Congregations that do small groups well, and that's a way that they do fellowship and formation. Hosting small groups in terms of discussing stewardship and formation and giving can be a terrific way to go. Many may be familiar with Herb Miller's Consecration Sunday. That is a very kind of detailed script on how to conduct an annual giving campaign. The benefit to that is it really does emphasize that givers need to give, shares with the congregation all the numbers in terms of you get a picture of where the majority of people are giving, at the $1,000 level, at the $2,500 level. So it's very open and transparent in terms of the trends of giving in the congregation. And then there's, of course, just a mix and match. What is ever unique, what works with your congregation. You may be celebrating an anniversary, or there might be a community involvement program that you've been working on for a long time. I would say look at the life of the ministries of your congregation and what is life-giving, and you may want to connect your campaign to an outreach initiative. Really, the sky's the limit here. You can be very creative in how you launch and end an annual giving campaign. Now, recruiting lay witnesses or testimonials, I think if there is one thing you're going to do different this year, this would be it. Sharing our stories is really mining the abundance of faith in the community. People want to know about others' experience. They get inspired by hearing about other people's stories, about how they first came to your congregation, how they value your congregation, how they think about their giving, how they may have been challenged. People weave into their stories issues around scarcity and anxiety of not having enough, of how we feel entitled, we deserve. What are we giving up if we give more? But mostly what you hear in testimonials is a lot of gratitude about giving as a response to blessings in this life, giving as a way of saying thank you to God and to community. So this is probably the most important thing that you can do. I suggest if you are having a 6-week campaign, that means you will recruit 6 people from the congregation to give their witness. And again, you want to do this early. You're not going to give somebody a week's notice. I would suggest recruiting them in May or June, letting them kind of think about it over the summer. And then in September, be able to meet with them and coach them, listen to their story. It's important to recruit from different demographics of your congregation, new members, people that have been for a while, single couples, young families. You look at your congregation, include youth if you can, but you want to be able to invite them to talk about how giving is a reflection of values, giving is a reflection of how they value the faith community. It is about taking risks. It's about being grounded in faith. It's not about the tithing. It's about the trying. And there's ways that you can invite them to share. My preference is to forego the second reading during the annual giving campaign. So instead of the second epistle, that is when you invite your lay witness to share their story. It is what we call a contemporary epistle to the brothers and sisters in your faith community. Many congregations, the rector or vicar will give up the pulpit and have people preach. They'll be prepped with, they'll have plenty of time to prepare. They'll be coached in terms of how they want to engage Scripture and what they want to say. But many do give over the pulpit at this time. You don't want to limit somebody's witness to an announcement or to coffee hour. So in terms of what you actually distribute, at the kickoff, it should include a letter, instructions about the process. Are you going to mail the pledge card? Are you going to get them hand-delivered? If you can, include the narrative budget, Vestry stewardship statement, a tithing or giving chart, a frequently asked question about pledging. Again, you can Google FAQ pledging, and there's a lot of good examples out there, and a pledge card. Thank you, and follow-up. This is something that my experience in the Episcopal Church so far is something that we can really do a much better job at. We don't say thank you enough. We are a Eucharistic people. That is our call, is to be a people of praise and thanksgiving. So I would suggest that your rector or vicar send personal handwritten notes to all of the people who pledge. Thank you letters from your stewardship chairs. It's great for your vestry or your stewardship ministry team to call after the campaign and thank people for their gift. When you send out quarterly statements, these are an opportunity to give thanks for funding God's vision in the congregation, to express gratitude. And something that you want to think about long term is how are you thanking your congregation on a regular basis about their generosity, how their giving is funding mission and ministry. So it really becomes part of the culture.
Laurel, I wonder if we couldn't take one question before you go into your next section. Would that be okay?
That's fine.
Yeah, we have about 12 minutes left.
Okay.
One question that a couple people had brought up is, how do you reconcile the recommendation that giving be done publicly with the scriptural advice that alms be given privately? I know this is an issue for a lot of shy Episcopalians who don't want to have attention drawn to them or to their generosity or their lack of generosity, but any words on that before we continue?
Well, again, almsgiving is different than tithing and offering. Almsgiving is often considered what you give more spontaneously and how you feel moved, and that's often, a homeless person on the street, or to, Girl Scouts raising money for a trip. So I don't want to get into particulars of tithing, offering, or almsgiving. But the fact of the matter is that we can talk about giving as part of our faith journey. It's not about being boastful or prideful. It's about sharing your journey in generosity. And that is incredibly inspiring for others to hear. And people need to hear each other's stories. I know, several people who tithe but don't want to talk about it. It's unfortunate because they're not sharing, quite frankly, the good news about what this discipline has brought to them. We can assume that people coming into our faith communities are coming from many different traditions, both mainline Protestant, Catholic, non-religious, the spiritual but not religious. So we need to be able to teach, claim a teaching vocation, and letting people know how our congregations are funded, but also that giving is a holy habit. It is a spiritual practice. And there is, again, Jesus talked a lot about money, and our way that the choices that we make with our money reflect often right relationship. So I hope that helps.
I didn't want to dissuade what you were doing, but go right ahead. We have 10 minutes left.
Okay. Is there anything else? One other question we want to take right now?
No, let's try at the end then.
Okay. So the Flourish in Faith Stewardship Narrative Series, this is something that my office started about 3 years ago, and it's a 6-week stewardship series that begins the beginning of October and goes through mid-November. And essentially I recruit 2 bishops, 2 lay leaders, 2 clergy to reflect on the gospel lection for that Sunday and weave in a stewardship principle or a personal story. We can assume that much of our formation is happening on Sundays through sermons, and so these were created to be bulletin inserts so people can read them when at a time when most of our congregations are conducting their annual giving campaign. Reflection questions can help facilitate conversation during a rector's forum or adult forum series as well. And they've been very helpful in sparking conversations. A colleague of mine, a priest in the Diocese South Carolina said, I had this faithful member who just refused to pledge. He didn't get it, and he read these essentially testimonies of the Stewardship Narrative Series, and that changed his mind. So if you're not familiar with these, last year's series was Blessed to be a Blessing. This year's series is called Flourish in Faith. I hope that it will be out in the beginning of April, and it'll be available on the TENS website. So this is part of the Flourish in Faith series is also a pledge card where you see this little tree here. That can be a place where you can put your logo for your church. A proportional giving chart. Okay, so that's the Flourish in Faith series. Now, one thing you want to think about as well is your demographics and how people give. Sometimes I hear congregations saying, should we just give up offertory envelopes altogether? Nobody uses them. But I would say hang on to them. They're very important to many people, and particularly the silent generation, those born from 1922 to 1945. They predominantly give weekly. They know their offertory envelope number. There's a willingness, there's not a lot of resistance in signing pledge cards. So if this is your demographic, you don't want to give up your offertory envelopes. Boomers often pay by check. They're through electronic transfer funds as well as offertory envelopes. Generation X is they're mostly giving electronically. Very many do not write checks at all. Electronic funds is a great way to keep your giving consistent year-round. Volunteering is important to this generation, as well as the millennials. The millennials, the generation shaped by Katrina and 9/11, being involved in ministry is very important. It precedes their giving, and they are giving at smaller amounts via text. Something to consider. I mentioned that the Flourish in Faith series will be available on the TENS website. The series is available for free to all TENS members. Your diocese may be a member, and if you are, great, you'll have access to all the series. If you're not a member, you can individually can become a member, or your parish can become a member, or you can also just be able to purchase it on the TENS website. Again, the Flourish in Faith series will also include the 7 bulletin inserts, the one example I showed you, as well as sample letters from the rector, senior warden, stewardship chair, the pledge card I showed you, prayers of the people to integrate during your liturgies over the annual giving campaign, a prayer over the pledge cards, and sample thank you letters. These will be available in Spanish, Chinese, and Korean. Some recommended reading includes Climb, it's Creating a Vision for Giving and Faithful Discipleship by Scott McKinsey and Christine Miller, as well as Ask, Thank, Tell. These are great primary resources. They weave theology and best practices really well together. And then finally, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship is hosting an annual stewardship conference this summer, July 11th and 12th in Salt Lake City. Joan Chittister is our keynote speaker. We're offering 16 workshops. We will max out at about 300 people, but what is exciting is for the first time this year, we will have a webcast registration. So for a fee of $75, you can register via the web, which will give you access to opening worship, plenaries, and 4 workshops. So your stewardship ministry team can gather in somebody's home or in the parish and be part of this conference even if you're not there physically. I want to point you to year-round stewardship ads. These are on the Episcopal Church website. For every month, there is a message about generosity and giving to keep giving top of mind. And then lastly, just to remember that stewardship is a way of life. It is grounded in God's grace. We encourage and affirm one another in responses of gratitude and generosity and giving, all to God's glory. So that was the Whirlwind webinar on annual giving campaigns. Again, I'd be happy to follow up with any of you via email. And why don't we take some questions for the time remaining?
There's a couple of questions that are out there. I was trying to take Kevin off of mute, but I'm having some trouble. Kevin, if you'd like to try and take yourself off of mute, Kevin Golden. Kevin had a couple of questions, Laurel. One of them was that they have a number of people who've been involved in the church for many years who give on Sundays and at other times, but absolutely refuse to pledge. In his case, he said, our rector makes sure the stewardship people leave them alone. What would you, how would you respond to that? That is a challenge for some folks.
It is. I mean, that's, again, when you look at analyze your trends and look at your numbers, you want to really see what percentage of your congregation pledges, and it's not going to be 100%. Many people are much more comfortable just making a year-end gift, or and that needs to be affirmed and honored. So you'll look at your pledge income, your plate income, your end-of-year giving. While pledging helps us plan, for many reasons and in many different cultures, there is resistance. And that's just part of the ministry. You don't want to give it up or dismiss it, but we do want to respect people's wishes. Also, there's so many different circumstances in terms of job change, geographic change, that could be an indicator of why people are not interested in pledging.
Another question that Kevin had, I'm sorry, Kevin, we're having trouble taking you off of mute, was with respect to electronic giving. And isn't it curious, Laura, we were just talking about this the other day. There will be a workshop at the TENS conference regarding electronic giving. And Laurel, I'm curious if you have anything else to say. The one quick thing I will say that I've learned in different workshops regarding electronic giving is that for the most part, it makes giving increase somewhat because when people are doing electronically and automatically, it just happens whether or not they come to church or not. There is some slight decline in some people's pledging when they are not in attendance. And in the modern world, a lot of people can't always get in. So that is one thing. Did you have any other comment on that, Laurel? And then we can take one other question.
No, other than it is a way that is many people prefer to give on a regular basis, and it's something to definitely research and explore for your congregation because it does keep your giving consistent. Again, it doesn't depend on people's attendance per se.
Okay.
And that might be a great option for another follow-up webinar, is just on online giving.
It might well be in some of the evolving issues. And at this moment, we don't have anyone else who has their hand up, and there are still some questions. So we're going to be wrapping up. Just know that we will be recording all of these chat messages, and Laurel or I will be able to reply to them. Just in closing, wanted to thank everyone for attending this evening. And just please know, this is not the only resource which you can have access to in all of these areas of empowerment for your congregation. The Episcopal Church Foundation as a part of our mission to empower congregations through leadership and financial resource development, has a number of resources in our recorded webinars, all of which are free. And we have a number of webinars coming right up. In fact, many of you may have already registered for the endowment webinar that's taking place tomorrow night, or you may wish to register for one of these other webinars that are coming up. I'll be doing the Planned Giving webinar in a couple of weeks. We'll be doing one on effective church and school capital campaigns, as well as spending rules for endowments. We're also going to be doing a couple more intensive workshops in the area of annual giving and annual stewardship. On April 9th, we'll be talking about communicating impact with a couple of our folks at ECF who have done a lot of this work with parishes throughout the country. We're also going to have a great opportunity to have another TENS board member do a workshop for us on making your case for the parish. This is something that every secular charity must do, and more today our parishes must make their case for the difference that they are making. So just in closing, just wanted to thank everyone for their participation. It's wonderful that you were here tonight. We will be sending out not only the recording, but also copies of the slides of this presentation, and as well the annual overview, which Laurel referred to in her presentation tonight. If you're able to come and attend at the Episcopal Network for Stewardship event in Salt Lake City in July, both Laurel and I will be there, and we'd be very happy to speak with you then. Laurel, any final notes?
Other than thank you for making time to attend tonight. I hope this was helpful, and blessings in your ministry. This is a wonderful and life-giving ministry, and feel free to contact me or Jim, because we would love to learn from you as well and share our experience. So blessings.
Blessings. And if Greer would like to stay on just for a minute, we're closing the webinar now, but Greer, you're off of mute if you would like to ask your question. Greer? Okay. Well, I thought I'd try nonetheless. Laurel, thank you so much for all